And that was the end of Philly. Oh, sure. Peter said he decided he'd have to give him a bit of a dig out. So he pulled Philly out from under the wheels of the JCB. Now, some people said he should have reversed the JCB off him first, but he got him out. He said poor old Philly was in flitters. The bananas were mush. The carcass was caved in, and I wouldn't mind, says Peter, when he was wearing a good pair of work overalls that they'd lent him, and there was a fair few years wear left in them, but now they were in flitters. But he managed to get the corpse up into the bucket of the JCB and brought him into the town. Went looking for the local undertaker, McCabe was this fella's name, and found him in the undertaker's shop. All undertakers should give an undertaking, they'll be in the shop when you come looking for him. Now this shop, the mortuary room, was a big room, and Peter went in. At the top of the room there were two coffins. One of them was full of Smith, a solicitor, died that morning, choked on a turkey bone. And he was laid out, he choked on a turkey bone and started coughing, never stopped coughing. He was laid out, and he had this grand pinstripe suit on him, and he was looking very much at his ease, as solicitors do often look. Now the other coffin, they thought they might get poor old Philly into it. When Peter had dragged Philly from under the wheels of the machine, Philly used to wear a wig, and the wig was in flitters too. Somebody said that when he got that wig, he looked 10 years sillier in the wig. Peter put the wig into his pocket, so he takes the wig out. When he gets to McCabe, he says, well, I wonder, could you fix that wig on him? I have to go off and tell his mother and the brothers and sisters. Could you doll him up a bit? Do you think we'd get him into this other coffin? And the other coffin was empty. It was a normal sized coffin, but Philly at the best of time was a tall fella, and after this particular accident, well, poor old Philly, let's say he put on a bit of height, if you know what I mean. So Peter says, shall we break it? We break the shins. If we break the shins, and luckily enough, one of his shins was already broken. So the thing was now to break the other shin at the same place, and to get him in. It's a bit like the fellas bringing the coffin. So they got they knew he'd fit in. Peter said, I have to go down the town now. Can you sort him out? Get him an old suit. A nice new suit. If you can get something like what Smith the solicitor is wearing, and if you can get it at the right price, and drop you a few bob afterwards, a few shillings. Don't you worry, says McCabe the undertaker, a very professional man altogether. Peter went down the town and he had himself a tightener. That's like a mixed grill, with a few bottles of ale and that. And he come back and he looked into the mortuary room, and there at the top of the room was poor old Philly's mother and his brothers and sisters, and they were looking into the coffin there, Philly's coffin, and they seemed fairly pleased now, considering. She come down the room and Peter shook her hand and said, I'm very sorry for your trouble. He was a great worker altogether, top and man to work. Very sorry for your trouble. By the way, he says, I owe you a half a morning's wages. It was about 11:10 the time he died. We'd say a quarter past. And I'd pass you on the money as soon as I find a postage stamp. She says, thanks very much. And off she goes. Peter went up and he had a look into the coffin, and there was Philly laid out resplendent altogether. McCabe, the professional, he had stapled the wig on so that it was straighter than it ever looked. And a grand suit, Philly's hands were, they brushed his tooth and his hands were lost there, and he was wearing a grand suit, pinstripe suit, the works. Peter went looking for the undertaker. He said, McCabe, you did a great job there. I owe you a few bob now for that suit. Not at all, says McCabe the undertaker. Won't cost you anything. Keep your hand in your pocket. I tell you what I did. I just switched the heads around. He was staggering from one side of the road to the other, careering left and right, a man in severe need of career guidance. And he was, as the poet would say, it's not the length of the road that bothers me, it's the width of it. He gets back to his own house, and before he goes into the yard, he hears an almighty racket coming from the yard. Screeching and caterwauling, what was it, only his cat and the local cats out in the yard discussing romance with Gusto. Gusto was the name of a cat belonging to a neighbour. Smith the solicitor, who I mentioned earlier, it was his cat, Smith's cat. But Peter's own cat was called Ponger Doo, which means the black stinker. Now, most vets will tell you that to find a cat that's pure black, if there's such a thing, pure black, it's very hard. There's usually a flash of white here, or on the paws, or on the undercarriage, or whatever, you know. Now, nobody looked closely enough at poor Pongar to do, because he was a bit of an arty old devil. And anyway, Pete is staggering in, and he hears the cat screeching and roaring. They're all sitting there, and he takes a swing, and he misses his own cat, but he goes into a somersault, falls back into the house, collapses down on the bed, fully dressed, and falls into a fitful sleep. He dreams he's having a fit. And he dreamt of all sorts of queer things. He dreamt he was flying. You know these strange dreams you have. I had a weird one, didn't I? He dreamt he was flying, and this is the thing now, he had a fear of flying himself. He wanted to go to Greece on a holiday one time, and he told a neighbour that, he wanted to go by barge. He was afraid to go up on a plane. This neighbour, Huey the Feathers, the fellow's he says, Peter, would you not go and get hypnotherapy? Get your fear of flying, you know, banished. Hypnotherapy, says Peter. Sure, that'll cost you an arm and a wing. But he dreamt he was flying, and he dreamt of all sorts of strange things. He dreamt of the crane bag, and he dreamt of the paper crown. He dreamt of a spring well bubbling up pure McArdle's ale. He dreamt of a purple polka dot JCB that whistled, I'm taking the first puff puff to Barry James Duff. And he dreamt of all sorts of queer things. And the queerest thing he dreamt of, he dreamt he was in the kitchen, and there up on top of the mantelpiece was the cat, Pongar Do. And what had the cat got in its paw? Only a stick of chalk. Now also on the mantelpiece there was a Delft dog, what we would call a Staffordshire dog. It's an ornamental dog. They usually come in pairs. There was only one surviving, and it's just a dog, a dog-looking dog. and there's the dog there. And now this dog, I remember the mother had this dog. She was very proud of it. And the dog would have a crack down the nose there. It's like the infant of Prague, the religious statue. There was no luck unless the statue's head had been knocked off at least once. If you put an old threepenny bit under the statue, that would bring you luck. Well, now this dog had cracks all over. In fact, his tail had been broken off altogether. So there was a hidey hole there. She used to keep the money there. This is her place for hiding the money. In case the priest came along looking for the Easter Jews, you know, that's where she'd have the money. She knew where it was. I remember one time I was in the house, and the priest came in. Father Heron he was a bit of a... Oh, sure, he was a windbag, amongst other things, and he was always giving out these sermons about people being materialistic and money mad. And he was a man that wasn't too slow in coming around the houses looking for the Easter Jews to keep himself in a big car and hush puppy shoes. And he used to conduct the choir too. He'd be making pound signs in the air like that. And then, of course, they changed from pounds, shillings and pence to the euro. And, of course, he'd be conducting like that. And singing like that. It was like a German Oompa band, you know. He come in this day into Mrs. Galligan, and he's sitting down expecting to get a feed, you know. And of course she gives him a feed, because that's the way the priest would treat it up to very recently. And she puts down a big plate of bacon and cabbage and that. Now, he was a very choosy fella. He'd been away foreign, and he got some very peculiar habits. He used to like English mustard. And he'd bring a wee, he knew there'd be no English mustard in any house around our parts. He'd bring a little jar of English mustard. Well, she set down the plate of cabbage and bacon, and she turned to the fireplace, because it was an open fire, to pick up the big crock of spuds to put it on the table. When she had her back turned, he takes out the jar of mustard, takes off the lid, gets the knife, and smears a bit on the side of his plate, back into the pocket. Sets down the crock of potatoes, has a look at the plate, and she says, Peter, who let the hens into the house? But after he was finished his meal and had his cup of tea and the like, she says, now, Peter, hop up there to the mantelpiece and get the priest the money out of the dog's arse. The priest went white in the face. That's another story. So this is where she kept the money, in the crack, in the hollow bit of the dog. And here's PJ dreaming that there's the dog there looking very nervy, because what is it funny, the cat with the chalk has written on a blackboard, Iverashot, number 7 on the blackboard. And not only that, the cat has a chainsaw and is pulling on the lead of the chainsaw to start this chainsaw to cut the death head off this dog. But PJ doesn't know what's going on here. He has another bit of a fit, and he finds himself in the bed after waking up. It was all a dream, or he thinks it was a dream. He goes out into the kitchen, the dog is there, as sound as it ever was, although full of cracks and holes and that, and there's no sign of the cat, and he's thinking, oh sure, what sort of a dream was that at all, at all, at all. Anyway,